Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Joining me today, we've got a very special guest. She is an NCAA All-American from UCLA. She's an Olympian from Singapore, and she just finished the ISL 2020 season representing the DC Trident. We've got today Ting Quah. Ting, how's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me on the show. I'm good. Actually getting ready for practice in 2 hours, but I usually do a little bit of land warm-up beforehand. Yeah, but it's been a good Monday so far.
Let's start with the present. You're still in Budapest in the bubble. The DC season just wrapped up. How'd you feel about getting to be a part of this experience?
I am very, very grateful. This is the second season of the ISL. I was invited to swim the Derby meet in Maryland last year for DC, but it was the last meet, and I wasn't a part of the team before that. So this year was actually the first time I got to be with the team for the whole season, and it's been really, really nice experience. Very thankful that I got to experience all of it, even though it didn't go the way it was structured last year just because of the pandemic and everything that's been going on. But it's been a really great 5 weeks here in Budapest.
Yeah. I guess first off, is it cool getting to swim for your old coach at UCLA again and kind of reconnecting there?
It's strange. It feels like I went in one full circle. I swam for Cindy at UCLA. I was there from 2010 to 2014. So we kept in touch, but I didn't see Cindy for about 4 years until last year when they needed an extra person. I think one of the German girls couldn't make it for the meet in Maryland, and they needed an extra swimmer for the relays. And Cindy reached out, and it was a really nice surprise. I was in Texas A&M at that time training with my younger sister and the team, and so I was already in the US, and so it was really nice being able to see Cindy again, swim for her in a different capacity, but it did bring back a lot of old memories, and I was fortunate enough to do that again this year, so I'm very happy with that.
So we talked about this a little bit in your post-race interview in the mix zone, but I would like to get into a little deeper of what you might take away from this experience. I think it's going to be cool hearing, as the bubble ends or as teams start to leave, kind of what everyone will have gained from this experience, because it's such a novel thing, right? No one's ever really been in a training camp where you're racing other elite teams every weekend, and kind of like in that bubble structure. Yeah, I guess just personally, what do you feel like you're taking away from this time in Budapest?
When I was asking some of my teammates who had been a part of the first season last year how it differed, just because of the scheduling and the timeline of the matches. I think last year how it was structured was that there will be different matches in different countries all over the world and over a span of 3 or 4 months. Because of the pandemic, we've been stuck here on the island for about 5 weeks, and very different from how it was last year. But I don't really have any reference just because I wasn't a part of that. But personally, I really enjoyed it. I really liked being able to be situated in one place with the whole team, and just being able to get into a rhythm of training together and competing together and racing. And it's really nice being able to see all other 9 teams. We don't really mingle a lot just because of we're trying to be safe, and they give us like different practice times, different eating times. We don't really mix. We have our own buses, but it's been so nice being able to just watch how people from all over, how they train, how they race, just watching people interact. And you're right, it's the first time, well, not the first time, but it's a very new, novel idea and approach to swimming and professional swimming. And I think what I'm taking away the most from this experience is just understanding that I shouldn't put a limit to when I should stop swimming just because of age or where I am as compared to other people who are not swimming and what they're doing right now, at this age.
Yeah. And especially, certainly, you've been swimming for so long. I mean, at a high level. I'm looking at your Wikipedia page. You've got medals from Asian Youth Games and Southeast Asian Games from 11 years ago. So you've been doing this since you were a kid, and now, we're the same age, which I think is pretty cool. We're both 28. Both class of 2014 and at our respective universities. But you've been doing this for well over a decade at a really high level. What is, and you talked about getting to be with the team, getting to see other teams, how they move, how they interact. What is your normal training situation like on a day-to-day when you're not in a Budapest bubble?
I've been on a very I've been doing the same swim schedule since I was 11. I started the 10 sessions a week high performance training regimen, when the Singapore Swimming Association decided to start a national training center and got all the up and coming kids and people who are already making the national team. They decided to bring everyone together, kind of like an OTC, but permanent. And they brought in a coach from Australia, and so he brought with him his idea of like how to train. And I remember, with every coach that I've been in throughout my career, I've learned things from each one of them. And that coach, I think what I learned from him was time management, focus, and just perseverance. Just because I was I was so young, I was only 11, and he brought with him all these ideas and how to train and perform at a very high level. And so I did doubles on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. We had Wednesday mornings off, and a Saturday morning practice. So that came up to 10. Morning practices would go from 5:30 to 7:30 because the kids had to go to school, and then afternoon practices would go from 4:30 to about 7 after school. I did that all the way until I left for college when I was 17. Went to UCLA, and it was a very nice. It was really nice because we practiced 9 times there in college, and it was a nice change because we started lifting. I had an extra session off, and it just gave me a bit more time to do school, and I just started training differently there, less mileage, more focus on getting stronger, doing weights. I graduated from college in 2014 and went back to Singapore. By that time, the very first version of the National Training Center had been disbanded, and there had been like a few revisions along the way, but that's when they brought Sergio Lopez in from the US to head the new National Training Center. So he was there from 2015 to 2000, so beginning of 2015 to 2016, and then he left after the Rio Olympic Games back to the US. And the training center is still there, but it's now headed by a different national coach and new staff. So similar schedule. After the lockdown back home, we started with 4 sessions, moved up to 5 to 6 to 7, and right before I came to Budapest, I was only doing 8 sessions. But um, what I learned from COVID this year is that 8 sessions seems to be working well for me, and I do not need to be doing as much mileage to be swimming as fast as I want to be. And there are things that I can do outside the pool to still swim fast and translate that into the water. And that's something that I learned during we call it circuit breaker, but during the lockdown during COVID.
Circuit breaker. That's a good name. Um, that's so it's 10 sessions a week since you were 11. I mean, I think a lot of young swimmers go through something like that. And I think that's kind of how, yeah, that's kind of how our sport works. That's how you're brought up. Did you ever, but that's a lot of swimming. That's a lot of time at the pool. That's a lot of dedication and commitment. I mean, did you ever want to step away from swimming at any point during that time? Did you step away at any point?
I think I think the longest time I took out of the pool was this year when we had the circuit breaker. All the pools at home were closed for about 2.5, 3 months. We don't have a pool at home. The government closed the beaches, so we couldn't do any open water swimming. So that's the longest forced break that I've had to take. Other than that, I think um, I take about 3 weeks. The longest I've taken straight without swimming would be 3 weeks a year. Swimming's it's not a very seasonal sport. I think once you're out of college, even in college, I remember people talking about in season and being out of season, and I remember NC2As ending in March, but and other sports stop taking breaks after NC2As, but the swimmers would still keep going because then we would switch to long course season and get ready for summer when people would start swimming international meets. So I've never actually taken like a really long break. The what I think the only time I've really thought about stopping swimming was when I graduated from college. It was because a lot of my teammates were retiring from the sport. They had gone jobs and were leaving school and moving on to the next chapter of their lives. I moved home to Singapore, and I knew that I still wanted to continue swimming because I still really enjoyed it, and I'm still fortunate enough to be able to represent my country at international meets, and I wanted to keep doing that. I felt a little bit lost, I think, after college, just because I felt like just because I graduated, I was now an adult and I should be doing adult things like having a job. So I did not think about stepping away from the sport. I did try to work a regular job on top of swimming, which then I realized I was burning the candle at both ends, and I got really tired, and I decided not to do that after a year of trying in 2015, and just decided to focus full time on training for the Rio Olympic Games, because I thought that I would stop after the Rio Olympics. So I thought, it's just like 6 months. I'll train full time, see how this like full time swimming thing goes. And it's 4 years later, and it's like now the Tokyo Olympic Games, and I'm still swimming. But to answer your question, no, I've never actually thought about stepping away from the sport, because I think the road's not been easy. I mean, there've definitely been moments where I haven't enjoyed being in the water as much. There are moments when I question what I'm doing, and if there's like a clear end goal to what I'm doing. I do have those moments, but I think I'm so in love with the sport and being in the water that I haven't actually ever thought about walking away from it.
And that's really cool to hear. Again, especially because you have been in it for so long. I think certainly you see a lot of athletes who are at the top of their game for so long that eventually they're like, okay, I never want to see a pool again. And I don't know, maybe you might get there one day, but it sounds like right now you're still enjoying it, and that's That's really cool to hear. So I'd like to talk about your your events, your training a little bit. You know, you started out as a young swimmer, I think as a 400 IMer. I know you went to the 2008 Olympics in Beijing and swam the 400 IM. You set a national record there. But now, you know, you swim butterfly, sprint freestyle. So you'd really kind of explored the gambit. So I'll ask a question eventually. Um, so I tell me about that first Olympic experience. You went in 2008 in Beijing. You swam the 400 IM. Um, what was it like heading into an Olympics at? Were you 15 or 16 at the time?
I turned 16 at the games. Um,
Okay.
yeah. Um, it was my first games. It was a really cool experience. I think before that, the only games that I had been to were the Asian Games and probably the Commonwealth Games. So they're like smaller versions, you know, where you do stay in a village and you do see people from all different sports, from different countries. But with the Olympics, it's just that, but on a much larger scale. And I remember it just being really overwhelming. The first time we walked into the dining hall, it was just like high school, but on a massive scale. You know, you see all different kinds of athletes. You have like the really tall basketballers and the really tiny gymnasts, and it was amazing. Yeah, I never seen so many different types of. Um, growing up swimming, you just see like the swimmer body, and you're very used to that. And that was one of the like few times that I got to see the whole like a whole different range of body types, and people just came in all shapes and sizes, and they were all athletes, and it was just amazing. I remember that 2008, that was before FINA started making the swim meet a little bit smaller, like making the cuts, the qualifying for the games a lot stricter. And so I think the swimming part of the games was a lot bigger in terms of the number of swimmers who participated. I remember swimming at the Cube. The stands were huge, and there were just so many people. And I remember walking on deck and just looking at all, you know, the big names and like swimmers I knew as well as like swimmers I didn't know. Just walk like they all look so strong and so not old in like a bad way, but they just look so mature and so sure of themselves and so confident. And um, I remember watching their races and just being so in awe of like how confident everyone was behind the blocks. And I remember the day of my race, reporting for my event. Um, I did enjoy the 400 IM when I was younger. The only stroke in that race I really don't like is the breaststroke. So the way I swim my event is that I go out really, really fast for the butterfly and the backstroke, and I try and hold on and watch everyone catch up and pass me in the breaststroke, and then just try and, you know, finish with everyone on the freestyle. And I remember talking to my coach before the race, and I told him like my plans the same as always. I'm gonna go out really fast, and I was really nervous, but I think, you know, the nerves leave the moment the starter um, does the whole taker mark, and like you leave the blocks for your race. And I think in that moment, for most people at least, I think that's when the nerves leave, because then the body kind of takes over and you just do, you know, what you've done every other time when you dive in for a race. And I think that's what happened. Like I was really, really nervous before. It was really loud, like people were screaming, and um, the whole venue was so big. But the moment the race started, I just body took over, did what I had to. I think I went. It's really funny because afterwards my coach told me that I had gone out under world record pace for the 100 fly for the first 100. So I think on TV, like for about a minute or so, there was the line that shows like how far you are in front of the world
Mhm.
record. which was really funny, I thought, because then, backstroke happened and then it disappeared. But it was a really good experience. Like, I really enjoyed, I was very, very nervous, but it was a really great experience. And I remember telling one of my teammates here, actually, because Jason Lezak is the manager for the Kelly Condors team. And I remember being there watching that race when he was the last leg of the 4x100 freestyle men's relay for the US when he caught up to France. And I was telling my one of my teammates, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I watched Jason race like 12 years ago in Beijing, and like I was so in awe of his race, and like that's still like one of the most memorable races that I've watched live. And I can't believe he's like in the rush, like the dining hall here, like just having dinner, like 2 seats away, and talking to like other coaches, and it's crazy to think that I was there and the way I viewed all these older swimmers and like where I am right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to hit on that now because one of the great things about ISL is that it does bring all these athletes together, and um, it makes such a cool environment of young and more mature swimmers, and gives them the opportunity to meet. And you are an extremely seasoned veteran in this sport, but it's like you're the way you're talking about it, you're still learning things, you're still picking things up. um do you now see yourself as one of those more mature swimmers, or do you still see yourself as a younger swimmer who still has a long way to go?
I would like to think that I'm sort of in the middle of both of that. Um, I like thinking that I always have something to learn. I think with that growth mindset, it helps me know that there are things that there's always something that I can do. There's always something I can learn to be better, um, and to get faster. Um, I do feel a lot more confident right now as a swimmer, especially here at the ISL. It started out a little bit rocky in the beginning, but I think um, from match two onwards, I kind of gained my footing, and I had a few good races, and it really boosted my confidence. Um, I still feel a little bit younger than some of the other more seasoned veterans, just because I think I was talking to my teammate about this yesterday because half of our team left on Sunday, yesterday morning, and it was hard saying goodbye to half of our team just because we've all been living and eating and swimming together for the last 5 weeks, and we really grew together as a team. So, and saying goodbye is always really difficult for me. But I remember telling one of my teammates that it'll be hard leaving this place, but I would leave knowing more people than on the flight here. I remember on the flight from Amsterdam, like it was a really small plane and it was just full of swimmers. And I just felt it really feels like high school to me sometimes, just because being on the Singapore team, we're always so small. And then when we travel for big international meets, like you have like the US team and the Australian team and China, Japan, and Canada, all these really big, strong swimming countries. And, they're always together, and there's not a lot of time outside of racing to really interact, because then you always like stuck with your countries. And so I remember being on the coming on the plane here, and same thing. I've been out of college for about 5 years, so I don't really have any more connections to people who are just coming out of college. So I remember being on the plane and looking around and like hearing people talk and being very comfortable with one another, but I felt a little bit out of place just because I didn't really know anyone. And I think that's the reason why I always, in a way, feel a little bit younger and out of place as compared to some of the older ones here. However, I also have learned during my time here that um, I have learned a lot of things throughout my career, and it that was made apparent to me during the time that we got to train together as a team when, you know, all of us are doing different programs because we're coming from different places, but there are times when, you know, someone would say like, oh, I have like a 200 pace set today. Like if anyone else is doing something similar, like, you know, we can look at each other's like programs and we can, you know, swim together maybe. And so I had the opportunity to practice with some of my teammates and share um, programs with one another. And during the course of that, I realized that I've learned a lot in the last 17 years that I've been swimming, and I have a lot to share. And I was able to do that when we practice together and just like share tips on like technique and different drills and trying to just work on things that we were, you know, struggling with or working on. And afterwards, after a particular practice when we are doing skill work, and I was showing one of my teammates, Miranda, like some drills to help with like positioning of the hips and pressing the chest down during breaststroke. Um, I left the pool thinking like, you know, I actually do know like a few things, and it felt really good to be able to share that knowledge and um, watch that be translated into the pool by someone else and watch them be able to learn from that. And that, I think, then helps me gain confidence in myself, knowing that I do know a thing or two about swimming and I'm able to share that.
That is, it's very cool hearing you talk about it, and that is really cool. I mean, if you've been at a high level and done something for so long, like you said, there's always more to learn. I think that growth mindset is an extremely helpful thing to anyone, athlete or no, but also it's like you pick up things along the way, and sometimes you don't always realize it, but you know, sometimes you do. Um, and so that brings us back to kind of the events you swim, maybe the way you train. Again, you started out swimming the 400 IM, and you know you kind of gradually went to now you're doing sprint free, sprint fly. Um, was that transition? Did you want to make that happen? Was that sort of a natural progression as your career went on? How did you go from one end of the spectrum to the other like that?
Um, So, like I mentioned earlier, the Singapore Swimming Association brought in a coach from Australia, to head the first national training center, and that was when I was 11. And he was there for 4 years, so I swam with him from the ages of 12 to 16. And I remember him leaving in 2008, right before, I think in March, the year of the Olympics, because that's when I moved. You know, the training center was disbanded, and I moved to a swimming club. And I think it was to do with like the change of the way we practice. I think the coach that I like started training with in 2008 saw the potential that I had for the 200 freestyle. So before that, I had been swimming the 400 free, the 800 freestyle, the 400 IM, the 200 butterfly. So basically, all the really painful ones. I think,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I wonder if, you know, if my coach from Australia had stayed, if I would still be doing those events, if I would even have left for college. Um, uh,
Really? You
yeah,
don't
yeah,
you
just because coming from Australia, I think he wasn't always like the biggest fan of the American
gotcha.
college system.
Hmm.
And you know, but the way things happened, he left after his contract was up after 4 years, and I moved to the swim club. And that coach, who then took me on, started training me more for the 100 and 200 freestyle. And also, he used to swim from BYU, so he was the one who introduced me and my parents to the idea of, you know, me going away to America to do college swimming after the Olympics. And I think, you know, swimming the 400 and the 800 and the IM and the fly and all those long events really set a really good base and foundation for me. Like, even up till today, I do swim the 50, the 100, and the 200 freestyle, but the way I train, I think I still like having a little bit of like the mid distance aerobic base especially in the beginning of season, just to get the fitness in. And I like, so the way I am, I like stepping up behind the blocks as confident as I can. And usually, to be confident, I like knowing that I've done everything I can physically to be in the like peak physical form. That helps me mentally, like knowing that like I've put in the work. So beginning of season, I always like getting like the aerobic, the mid distance work in, and I think it actually paid off here because we swam some matches back to back, and um, you, I think having that mid distance base helped me keep the fitness at a certain level over 3 weeks. Um, so that helped a lot. Then I went away to college, and then I just kind of stuck to the hundreds and the 200s free and fly in the 50s also. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, okay. So that's a cool progression, and I think it seems like a good balance, right? Of getting some aerobic, getting some speed. Um, we've talked about you a lot. We haven't even talked about your two siblings who are also great swimmers in their own right. Zhang Quah and Jing Quah. Zhang, who just finished his collegiate career last season at Cal, and then Jing, who's a senior this year at A&M, who you mentioned you had trained with her in the past. Um, let's start from when you were 11, growing up. What was it like having them around to be able to swim with as well?
Um, so I think that they got started with swimming because my mom was the one who would bring me to practice, and so she would have my brother with her and my sister at a later time. But they were at the pool so much that at some point, I think my brother just kind of got in by himself and was playing in the water. And one of the coaches saw it and was like, why doesn't he like join one of the groups and learn water safety as well as the four different strokes. And so I think they got into the sport because I was already in it. And I think that it's great that we all did the same sport because it made planning and scheduling for my parents like a lot easier in terms of like sending us to the pool and having like a similar. Yeah, I talk to my friends sometimes in some families, like I know like one person swims, the brother does baseball, someone else does basketball, and it I think I'm really lucky that my siblings do the same sport as me because then um they we all go through, I think, the same thing, and we all understand it, and we are able to support one another, which is something that I've come to learn is very important, even though swimming is an individual sport. And I've also learned that swimmers get swimmers. Like we understand the crazy schedules, the year-round season, the lingo, and it's just like great that I have that with my siblings. That I have, we're still very competitive with one another, but at the end of the day, if one of us succeeds, then it's like success all around for all of us. And I think it's also made staying in the sport so much easier for me. Like it's walking away from the sport hasn't even been an option for me really. I've never even thought of it just because I'm having so much fun. Every time we travel together, as a family, and I get to see them race, and we get my room with my sister, and we get to all experience this together. So
That's like you said. I think swimmers are built differently. We get one another. Uh, I'll never forget a story my brother told me, who is also a swimmer. He trained with Cal for a while, and he was on the train, and he saw three girls going into the city, obviously going to an event, and two of them were like, putting on makeup on and like getting ready and dressed really nice, and the third one of them had a hoodie on, and it said like, it was a swim team hoodie, and she was just shoving Cheez-Its in her mouth. It's like, that's swimmers for you, man.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so that, I mean, it is very cool to have siblings, certainly, who already understand your origin, where you come from in terms of your family, and your upbringing, but then to also go through those experiences with them of, like you said, swimming's not easy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of dedication, and to have them understand that, especially, all three of you do it again at a very high level. I'm guessing you've been to Asian Games, Commonwealth. Yeah, you've been to lots of, very high level meets with them. Can you think of a time where you've ever really leaned on them at a meet like that, or vice versa, where they, came to you for advice or comfort or wisdom?
I think last year at the World Championships in Korea, Gwangju, I think, if I remember correctly, I think I was going through um, a pretty difficult time, and that was my brother left for Cal in the beginning of 2017. My sister left for A&M the same year in August, and I think that was like a very difficult year for all of us, just in terms of transition, change. My parents were also, trying to deal with like having like their babies leave home for college, like at the same time in the same year. And I remember just it was the first time I think in a long while that I didn't have them with me at practice, and it was not easy for me. And for 1 or 2 years, it took us a while to kind of get used to not seeing one another except for meets over summer or maybe 1 or 2 weeks over Christmas break. And um, we've always been very close growing up, and I think that's helped a lot, both in and out of the pool. But I think in those 1 or 2 years after they first left, I wouldn't say we drifted apart, but we talked a little bit less, and I also felt that I had missed a lot of my sister's childhood, because I went away when I was 17, and she's 8 years younger than me, and so she was only 9 when I left for college, and I was away for 4.5 years. I came home, was home for about 2 years before it was her turn to leave for college. So I just felt like I had missed a lot of her childhood, and then I was also missing a big part of her um, growth when she went away to college. But I think last year in 2019, that year, like that during Guangzhou, that was a time when we actually I roomed with my sister, and that's when we actually really started having like deeper conversations. We actually started talking about really serious things, and we opened up to one another. And my brother also like was like more open with things, and I could sense there was a shift. Before that, we had always we had been very close, but we were all children. And I think last year in Guangzhou was the first time we actually looked at one another and were like, hey, we're not like 5 and 9 anymore. We can actually like talk about these like real things, like serious things. And um, like we can be there for one another. It's not like, oh, you fell down, like here, let me get you a band-aid, like that kind of support. Like we still have that, but now on a different level. Like we're still swimming, we're still in the sport. And it was a really nice realization, I think, for all of us, that um, we were still going to be there for one another as swimmers, but also as siblings on a more adult, serious level. And I remember it's so funny when my mom was pregnant with my sister. I was so excited because I was like, I have a sister finally. Like I love my brother. Like it was really nice having him growing up. But it's like, yes, I have a sister. I have someone I can like share clothes with. We can share shoes, like save money, but also like share stuff. And it's really funny because my sister and I, one, we look nothing alike. She's so much tinier than me, and so at a certain point, I was like, I just accepted the fact that we can't share clothes, we can't share shoes. Like, if we want the same thing, we have to buy two of the same thing. Like, and it's so frustrating because my mom also doesn't have the same shoe size as us. So my sister is like, what am I? I'm like 7.5. My mom's 6.5, and my sister's 5.5. So it's like, we're all women, but like we can't share anything. But finally, last year in Guangzhou, when we were talking, I was like, this is what I can share. It's like I can share my experience in swimming or my experience in college. I can share things like I've been through in the last few years, and just let my siblings know that I would be there for them also in that capacity. So That was really nice. Like last year, I think, and it's just kind of been like we're going really well. It's like an upward trajectory, and we're still like calling each other a lot, and we're getting closer. So I like that.
I I can totally relate to what you're talking about. I think that's a huge turning point in a sibling relationship when, maybe, you all go in your different directions, or maybe you stay together, but you're just kind of going through high school, going through college, you start getting different experiences, and at a point you realize, yeah, like you said it great. Like we're not little kids anymore. We're adults, and we can kind of start connecting and communicating on these deeper levels that you might already do so with mentors or parents or coaches, or maybe even friends. But um, when you get to that point with a sibling, I think it's really special, and it's cool to hear about your experience with that. um, all right, so back to swimming. uh you been to 2 Olympics or 3 Olympics?
I've been to two. I was in the 2008 Beijing Games and the Rio Games in 2016.
Okay. So I have to ask, going into those 2012 Olympic Games, um, what was the reason that you weren't able to go?
um, I did not make the team because I had broken my arm over Thanksgiving in 2011. I had gone home with a teammate. If Cynthia's watching this, I'm really sorry. I'm going to tell everyone about how I made your sister bring me surfing. But um, Thanksgiving, I remember that the date very clearly. It was November 27th, 2011. I was home with my teammate and best friend from college. She had invited me home, and her sister was going surfing. And I was like, I'm in California. Like, I need to learn how to do like a Californian thing. Like, and I also really wanted to, I like pushing myself and I like learning new things. So I was like, please take me with you. And
Growth mindset.
exactly. And I remember she was like, okay, we're going to Huntington Beach. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't care. Like, just bring me. And so I borrowed a wetsuit and a longboard, and she brought me out, and it was great. Like, she was teaching me like how to get on the board, and I managed to get on my knees in the first half an hour. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, it's so fun. We go into the beach. We go onto the sand to rest for a little bit, and the waves are getting bigger, and I turn to her sister, and I'm like, I want to learn like how to stand today. Like, I need to do it today because I don't know like when the next time I can surface. Like, it must be today. And so we're going out, we're paddling out, this really big wave comes, and I get off my board, push it to the side, and get ready to go under the wave. I didn't push the longboard far away enough, and the wave angled it toward me, and like it hit my arm. Like, the wave slammed the board into my arm, and I got tumbled back into the shore. I've broken my arm twice before as a kid, hairline fracture, so nothing too serious. But I know like what it feels like to have like my arm broken, so I knew right away like what had happened. So I get tumbled into the shore. I'm like holding my arm. Thank goodness I have a wetsuit on. And then I go up to my teammate. I'm like, Cynthia, like, we have to go to the hospital. Like, I broke my arm. And I can see like right away that panic sets into her eyes. And she's like, maybe you sprained it or something. I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I've broken my arm twice before as a child, so I know what it feels like. And it's really broken. Like, look at it. It's like bending and like not the right shape. And
Look
so
at
and so she's like, okay, let's go. And like, so that's how our Thanksgiving morning started. Like,
it. This was Thanksgiving morning. Oh man.
exactly, it's just the start of the day. And so her mom's a nurse, and like, but she called her mom anyway, and her mom like showed up at the ER, and the lady had to do an X-ray, and was trying to get the wetsuit off. And I remember it was so badly broken that it hurt just to have her like have anyone touch me, and they ended up having to cut the wetsuit off my arm just to get an X-ray. And I remember just being put in like a splint and spending the rest of the day being in pain and miserable, and just like my teammate felt really bad. I felt really bad. I begged her mom not to tell Cindy. I was like, please don't call Cindy. Like, don't ruin her Thanksgiving. Obviously, 2 minutes later, she called my coach just to let her know, like, oh, your swimmer broke her arm. And I remember it was really funny because I remember trying to text my parents about what had happened. So they were back in Singapore because my siblings were still really young at that time. So they never really came up for holidays. Like I would usually go home, but I remember texting my parents at the same time. Like I would text my dad telling him what happened because he was at work, and I was texting my mom and she was at home. And it was really hard to do it with one hand and having to text like two different people at the same time. So my dad text me like what happened, and I was like, oh, I broke my arm. And then um he like, so my mom asked like what do you break? And I was like, my forearm. And then my dad's like, how many bones? And then I was like just texting so many people at the same time that I told my dad both. But then he texts my and then my mom texts me saying like, your dad just told me you broke both arms. I'm like, no, stop, like let me just text one person and tell like that one person what happened. I broke one arm but both bones in it. So I had broken it so badly that I needed surgery, and I got it in December. Had 2 plates and 15 screws put in. And I remember, yeah, I remember um, being in a lot of pain for 2 weeks, and in the middle of the night having to wake up, every 4 hours to take a painkiller. And my coach had the doctor put me in a waterproof cast, which I learned is not water like what you think it is. Like it doesn't keep water from touching your arm. It's just a cast that is made from a different material that wouldn't like dissolve in water. It just the water still gets in. It just like takes about 3 to 4 hours to dry. So I was in a waterproof cast. I would get my coach made me get into the water to kick. So I'll be like kicking around like that. Morning practices, kick around, get out, let it dry for about 4 hours, and then get in again for afternoon practice. So that was most of winter training for me. Got the cast off, I think, end of January, and I didn't have a lot of time before Pac-12s. So that year was really rough. Like I didn't swim too great at Pac-12s, took it very, very hard. I was like, it's fine. Like I still have Olympics. Like I'm going to train really hard for it. And I remember trials being in April that year, but I just didn't have enough time to train up for it, so didn't do well at trials. So just basically had like a pretty bad season all around. And I was bummed because my brother made the London Games that year, and I really, really wanted to go for that with him, but he was by himself for that one. Yeah.
And so even the next year or that summer or the the next season was mentally for you, was that easier to bounce back from, or did that take a while for you to get over the hump of?
I think summer of 2012 was difficult. I was definitely very upset. The Olympics only comes around every 4 years, and it just felt like a very wasted opportunity. I mean, I know everything happens for a reason. It's just like frustrating that, not to say that when a non-athlete gets injured, it's not a big deal. I think it's just because being an athlete, your body is so, what you do, your body is so important to your sport. It's everything. The moment you get injured and you have to sit out from practice and from meets, it just like takes away, or it just kind of creates a bump in your season. And it doesn't just affect you physically. I think it also really affects you mentally when you have to sit out and watch people doing what you want to be doing or doing what you love. And yeah, I remember the next year I went back. The next year in 2012, I went home with the same teammate for Thanksgiving. Did not go surfing this time. I remember we were not allowed to do any like physical activities, and we were in the kitchen on Thanksgiving, and like I offered to like help with like carving the turkey, and everyone's like, no, no, like don't let Ting have the knife. I'm like, guys, it's a knife. It's not like a surfboard. We're not. But I pretty much for the rest of college lived in a bubble, kind of, in terms of taking care of my body. So summer of 2012 was really difficult, but I think going into my junior year of college, like I was very determined to make it a lot better. than the year before, and I think that was like my best year in college. And I was also really happy. I think it was like one of my happiest years in college swimming. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did really well. That was the year I placed at NCs, and it was like it was a confidence booster in a way. Like I was like stepping up next to these like really fast girls from Cal and Arizona and SC and Florida, and holding my own, and it was just a really good feeling, especially after such a bad season the year before.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, that's always nice to hear. You were able to bounce back and kind of rebound, and then, um, and then you make. How good of a feeling was it to make that Olympic team in 16?
So good, especially since my brother like was on it with me. It was fun. I remember after the games, we were talking about Tokyo, which at that time seems so far away, but it's 2020, and it's not happening this year, but it's already 2020. And I remember afterwards when we were talking to my sister about that, we decided to make it a goal for all of us to be in Tokyo together next year. Yeah, I really hope that happens. And I know like we're not together training for it, but we're all like in our respective places and working really hard to try to make that happen.
Yeah. Did was obviously like I said, yeah, Zhang is at Cal. Uh, Jing is at A&M, still competing this year for A&M.
Yeah.
Did you ever consider staying in LA, or were you pretty set on moving back to Singapore after that, after you were done collegiately?
I looked at a few professional programs around the states. At that time, I still don't think UCLA has like a professional team pro group with the school, and I just felt like I wanted to be with a group of people who are going to be training with a bigger focus on long course meters, and so I was trying to find a group within the U.S. Um, but there was word that Sergio was going to hit like the national program back home, and I think that was what made my decision to go back home after college afterwards.
Um, has in a similar vein, has being at the ISL, around people who are very like-minded in their goals and their daily routines, has that affected how you see your daily routine, or your training group right now at all?
Definitely reconsidering like the way I want to train and the way I want to, even up till before the lockdown back home, before the circuit breaker, I was still training at 5:30 in the morning, just to accommodate like the high school kids who had to leave for school at 7:30. But then I remember after circuit breaker, just because of social distancing, they were trying to separate the kids who were going to school from like the people who were working with the pro swimmers. I got to swim from 7:30 to 9:30, and then 3 to 5 in the afternoon. And it made such a big difference for me, just having more sleep, having more time in the day after afternoon practice to get stuff done, having one less session, which allowed me to do more of like the land work that I needed. And then even coming here, just again, same thing with like being able to practice from 8 to 10, and being able to sleep better. And I feel so much better, a lot more rested. I can go so much harder in the water, and just hearing stories about how some of the older athletes are still doing what they're doing at whatever age they're at, and how they make it work and how they make it sustainable. And because swimming is not one of the sports that really has a lot of money in it. I think the whole idea of the ISL is to try and make that happen and make it a sustainable career for people who do want to stay in swimming professionally after being amateurs in college. But just listening to people talk about how they make it work at home with like their jobs, like on the side, raising families, like taking classes, it's just been very inspiring, and it makes me realized that, it's not going to be easy when I go home just because of the environment that I'm in. I train mostly with high school kids, some college kids, but it's very different from being here. Um, that it would take a lot of work, but it's possible. Like if I really want to, and if I really want to make it happen, like it's possible, and that's exciting, and that's something that helps make it helps makes going home a little bit easier just because it's been so great here, and really if like I could like not worry about money or anything and just be able to train and sleep as much as I need to and feel properly, like I would do this every day and not like have to worry about stuff. But like watching people and learning from them and listening to them and how they make it work really inspires me to try and do that on my own too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good stopping point. I know you've got practice in about an hour, so I don't want to hold you too long. Do you have any parting thoughts before we sign off?
Um, just want to say thank you so much for having me on here and allowing me to share my experience here at the ISL as well as just in general as a swimmer. And yeah, I hope to keep doing what I love as long as I'm fortunate enough to be able to do it. And I hope to be able to help and nurture and share for as long as I can to all the younger swimmers out there.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.